David. Welcome back to the UK and welcome to the Jewish Medical Association webinar, which is devoted tonight to hearing about what happened to you and when you went as a volunteer to Romania. There are a number of questions that everybody wants to ask, wants to know the answers to from you. The first obvious one is the question, how did you get involved in this? How did you find yourself suddenly disappearing from northwest London to Romania?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Professor Katz and the committee for inviting me to speak. And I work in various places. I work in Fetal 2 sessions a week in my father's surgery, and also as a locum in various practices across northwest London, Golders Green and Edgware. And yeah, that's my background really. But I got involved in this. It was all very quick, really. I mean, I think like everyone, I found it very upsetting to see the news from Ukraine, the war, the disruption. You know, who would have dreamt something like this would happen so close to us in our time? I'd never really heard of the Tikva group before. And then I saw an appeal that went out that, you know, that people were collecting money. I gave a little bit of money, but you know, I'd sort of wanted to think, how, you know, how could I help in a more practical way? And I couldn't really think of a way to do that. But then on the big WhatsApp group, Joe Reese's huge WhatsApp group of Jewish doctors, someone called Sharon, who I've never met, but I've communicated with now, she posted an appeal for doctors to go. Doctors needed to go to Romania and to help the large group of the Tikva community that have been evacuated there. So I saw this and I thought, well, maybe I should. You know, I sort of grew up on stories of Rabbi Dr. Schonfeld and the Kinder Transport, you know, him sort of going over to Europe and doing heroic things and bringing refugees over. And so I thought, you know, if I can try and help that and help in some sort of practical way, and even in a little way, then that would be a good thing to do. I spoke to my wife about it. You know, it's going to be not so easy on her having our 6 children to look after without. I mean, not that I'm home that much anyway, to be honest, but to have her looking after our children without me. And she encouraged me to go. She you know, she said, look, you've grown up in a family which is used to doing this type of thing. I mean, you know, when I was little, my father went round. Most people here probably know my father, a well-known GP in Fetal and also a Moyle. And I have vivid memories of him going around Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union for, you know, extended periods, traveling all over the place to do brisses for people who, you know, hadn't been able to in the communist era. And so yeah, she said it would be hard to manage without me, but it would be very good for our children to see that their father goes off and does something like this. So I agreed to go, and that was on a Monday. And then I think that was Monday evening that I agreed to go, and Wednesday morning early we left. I did have some sort of experience, maybe in a little way, in terms of I volunteered as a GP for an organisation called CARE, which is a charity which looks after children with special needs, and we've been doing that for the last camps. And so, yeah, I sort of experience of looking after large groups of people. And so, yeah, I went at short notice. I have to thank my colleagues, Jakob Opat at Greenwich Road Surgery, Leora at Harvard, and Karen Grossmark at PHGH, and Walter Abelman, who stepped in for me for a session at Dr. Adler's surgery, and also Penshurst Gardens. All these surgeries had to cope without me for a week, and they did so very graciously. So we left, and we left on. I'm going to share. Can everyone see Jeremy has just joined us?
Jeremy has just joined us, and you should be able to share.
Sure, people are aware. Can people see? Would you like to introduce Professor Katz? Would you like to introduce Jeremy?
Jeremy is basically the person who ran the operation He's worked for international charitable organizations in the past and has been working for Tikva recently, and he is I think he's entitled the Chief Financial Officer, but it seems to me that he's been looking after a little bit more than finances as judged by the current escapades.
Welcome, Jeremy. We'll talk to you soon and find out your perspective on events. But yeah, let me share my screen and I can show you some pictures. We left on a Wednesday morning. A whole group of us went. Am I screen sharing now?
You've started, and it's coming up. There we are.
That went out. We went out all together to Romania. This is trustees of the charity and the various other volunteers who came to help. And we have also here, these are my two glamorous assistants. And the call was put out for nurses, and neither of these ladies are nurses. One in the middle is called Judy Liebert, who is a student midwife, and on the right is Abigail Gilbert, who is a medical student at UCL. And they, the call only went out at short notice, so they volunteered to sort of be nurses. As it happened, we didn't actually really need them as nurses, and so they ended up just being very useful, playing with the children and just being very helpful in general. But yeah, that's the story of how I got involved.
Right, and I know that Jeremy's going to talk to us more detail later, but briefly, what from your perspective, what do you know about Tikva, and also why are there so many orphans that this kind of effort is required?
So my understanding, and Jeremy will tell us more, Tikva is a large organization primarily composed of an orphanage. Well, Jeremy, you speak to us. Tell us what Tikva is.
I'll tell you, Tikva started over a quarter of a century ago. And basically, a rabbi had come out from Israel to revive an aging Jewish community. And someone posed him the question once he was there, someone's pet topic, or if you want, what they were most interested in was Jewish orphans around the world. And everywhere they went, they were asking the question, posing rabbis, are there local Jewish orphans? And Rabbi Bach said he'd look into it. And he discovered Ukraine, being as it is, one of the poorest, if not the poorest countries in Europe, with terrible issues with alcoholism, drug abuse, HIV, very, very high divorce rates, single mothers coping with kids alone or not being able to cope with kids alone. So what we have is around 30% actual orphans with neither parent alive, and 70% are what we call social orphans, meaning that the mother, normally the mother, it's very rare that the father's in the picture, the mother's unable or unwilling to take care of the children. So that's what we have in our orphanages, and we have 270 at the moment of these children, the bulk of whom are under age 18 and are minors and officially wards of the state, and the remainder are in our university and live in our student dorms.
Thank you.
Yes.
So now we know a little bit about Tikva. We know a little bit about how you were recruited, which was really a question of offering yourself forward and making the arrangements in London. And then what happened when you arrived at the site?
I think that probably this is a good moment for Jeremy to talk a little bit about what happened, about how the group arrived at the site, because we were in, I will show you where we were. This is Romania over here. This is Ukraine up here, with Odessa bang in the middle, just the north of the Black Sea. We were in this hotel at the southeast, on the southeast coast of Romania. So this is our glamorous hotel, and this is the Black Sea, and a very cold time of year it was. Jeremy, tell us how you managed to get there.
Yeah, so if you will have seen on David's map, we actually traveled in a very circuitous route. I'm saying when the war started, which was very early Thursday morning, when the first explosions could be heard in Odessa. So we'd been prepared for this, and the first people, around 80% of our community and the children that we have, and again, the people who are in our community, the community comprises mainly young couples with kids, and they are graduates from our home system, from our orphanages, and from our school system, which includes another 600 local kids from the area. So it's primarily a young community, and a lot of them grew up in their homes, and a lot of them have never left Odessa or Ukraine. So around 80% of them didn't have papers, didn't have documentation that would be necessary to cross international borders, neither to leave Ukraine or to enter another country. So we'd prepared lists beforehand who had the paperwork, who didn't. Those who did were shifted out on the first day of the war, which was the Thursday, and they came to Moldova. We crossed around 200, 250 people to Moldova before the curfew kicked in. The rest of us left on the Friday morning on quite a treacherous route, which took 28 hours into Western Ukraine, which on David's map was all the way over to the left of that map. And then we were there for 10 days. The group from Moldova, at some stage, we moved to Covance in Romania. And then eventually all of us, after a couple of weeks, regrouped where David said in Neptune, in the Constanta region. And the reason we chose there was because we were in touch with the local Jewish community in Romania, the heads of the community and the joint, and they made us aware that Constanta is a summer hotel resort. And in winter, 90% or almost all the hotels are closed and closed up. And there was a couple that actually have heat because the others don't even have an option of heat. And those couple will be happy to take us in. So that's why we settled on Neptune. We got obviously a greatly reduced rate. And we started off in one hotel. And I think even by the time, I'm not sure if by the time David came, we had already taken the Parallel, the next door hotel. And we're now based in those two hotels, 3-star hotels. And we are currently just over 900 people. We're expecting by Pesach will be 1,000 people.
Right. So the numbers are considerable and increasing. Right.
Yeah.
So, David, you've now arrived there, and what was your take when you arrived?
So we arrived at this hotel, and as soon as we arrived, it felt very jolly. Actually, there was loud music. There was lots of children sort of milling around and sort of doing activities, and we were sort of whisked off soon to supper, and lots of people in the dining room, and it felt a bit like sort of a camp atmosphere superficially, but it quickly became apparent that we were faced with lots of people who had gone through a quite a harrowing experience and were still trying to digest what their surroundings were and what they were going through. So as soon as we arrived, we brought with quite a lot of medical supplies. I wasn't involved at that stage when the planning was done, but one of the trustees of Tikva runs a pharmaceutical company, so he was able to obtain loads and loads of medications, and we took far too much, really. We didn't really know what we were going into, that's the thing, but we took nebulizers, we took huge amounts of antibiotics and steroids, and anything that a GP would generally want to prescribe, we took. I hope that there would be no emergency cases, and I'm not really, as a GP, really equipped to deal with emergencies other than dial for an ambulance. And I sort of ascertained that there were hospitals in the nearby towns within half an hour. So thankfully we didn't have to actually use their services at all. But yeah, we set up the medical room, which is unpacking boxes and just trying to set up things quite quickly. And then I started seeing patients almost immediately. I think I can't remember, I must have seen 25, 30 on the first evening, and then many more the next day.
So 25 the first evening. What language were you speaking to them? Did you have interpreters?
So the people there, they all speak Russian, and then some of them can speak English, and some of them can speak Hebrew. I can speak English and a bit of Hebrew. And so we managed, people who couldn't speak either English or Hebrew, there was someone who was allocated to me as an interpreter. So we managed to communicate, and Google Translate came in quite helpful as well, actually. It's not always entirely accurate, but we managed. Body language also helps, smiling and pointing. And I've now learned the words, I've learned the Russian words for things like cough and cold and sore throat, and diarrhea is pretty much the same, and temperatura I can also say, what that one means. So yeah, that's how we communicated. And
presumably there was no adult with any of the children to actually get any background history. What did you do about immunization? Did you have any information about whether they were immunized in any kind of way?
There was no medical information that I had, no past medical history, but I mean, people did come with adults. As Jeremy said, there's an orphanage, so there's lots of children, but they had staff. There's a nurse who looks after the orphanage. There are various other carers, and lots of the people I saw, lots of the children I saw mainly were from young families, the families that associated with the community who'd arrived, and the teachers and their children, and the residents of Odessa and their children. So people usually came with parents or adults. There's no sort of children running around without supervision.
Right. And this first day you saw 25. So the next day you said you saw many more.
I think 50, probably 50 or 60 on the second day.
Yes.
That was quite busy. A lot of they weren't necessarily the sort of 10-minute appointments that we have here as GPs. Some of them were quite in and out. 1 or 2 minutes. They just wanted their throat checked or whatever, and we had to make do. I didn't document very much. Certainly not to the standard that I document notes in this country, but I did try and document diagnosis and treatment, and the patient's name. The name was a bit challenging because people spell their names in sort of in the Russian script, so it was a bit difficult to actually they'll keep track of who I'd seen. But I kept a spreadsheet, and I didn't have to deal with a lot of the complexities that we deal with as GPs. I didn't have to deal with blood results. I didn't have to deal with hospital appointments and referrals. It was almost exclusively minor illnesses, coughs, colds, temperatures, diarrhea, vomiting, a few other things sort of thrown in for a bit of spice, but that was in the main, that's what it was.
Right. And so were there any particular challenges that you had to deal with during your time there?
There were lots of challenges. I mean, nothing was very challenging. Everything, was things I do every day in my job in London. So it was just dealing with people's different approaches. People, I think the medical culture is quite different in Ukraine. They do things differently. There's a lot of self-medicating. Parents were giving their children antibiotics that they brought with them. Even one mother told me that she showed me the ampules of dexamethasone that she brought, and she was giving IM injections to her children, and so a lot of unfamiliar medication as well. And I think they expected a lot of treatment for things that we in England don't necessarily treat. We say, oh, it's likely to be a virus, and they're just going to get better on their own. The people who live in Ukraine told me that when they measure their temperature and it's 37 degrees, 37 is already a temperature for them, and they run off to try and see a doctor or to buy things from the chemist. I think you can buy lots of things from the chemist that you can't buy here, and they also expect lots of sort of symptomatic relief medication, which we're encouraged not to prescribe here, really. Sort of cough medicine and things like that. It was a bit of a challenge initially to try and sort of communicate that I didn't really want to give any of this treatment to a lot of the children. I just felt that a lot of them were minor viruses and would get better on their own. And of course, people having been packed together on coaches for so long and been, or living one on top of each other in hotel rooms. And I mean, I'll show you a picture soon of all the children in the orphanage, the little ones sort of sleeping 5 or 6 to a bed. And so everyone's on top of each other, viruses are rife, and it was difficult to communicate to the parents and the carers that I didn't need to treat everything, but they got used to it. And in fact, one of my secretary, helper, interpreter, she told me after a few days that she said, she only spoke to me in Hebrew, but she told me, that before they come into the room, I tell them what questions you're going to ask them. I say that you're going to say it's a virus and that you're not going to give them any medication. And so that might be the reason that people became less sort of argumentative as time went on. We had quite a funny moment actually when there was one of the kitchen staff had burnt her arm, and she'd come to see me about it. And I got busy trying to see what I could do with it. And my interpreter sort of leaned over my shoulder and said, "Virus," which caused general merriment all around. Because that was one of the only things that I actually thought was not a virus. But yeah, that was one of the sort of challenge in dealing with the medical culture was one. Actually, the language the barrier wasn't a big deal, but sometimes I did find that there was a problem with confidentiality. I mean, this girl's, a girl from the community, and if she had to interpret things, and sometimes I didn't feel it was entirely appropriate, and then I sort of sent her out and tried to make do with Google Translate. So that was a little challenge I had to deal with. Medication was a problem. And so we brought loads of stuff with us, but some of the adults are on sort of longer term medication, which we couldn't get hold of. There was a lot of women on contraception, which they needed, and we didn't bring with us initially. So we had to try and arrange for a shipment of that from England. And insulin, there was someone with diabetes on insulin, and we had to try and get that across from England as well. So, we were, I was trying also at the same time to work on some sort of plan of trying to be able to get medication dispensed from a local pharmacy. Would they accept our prescriptions, or would we be able to find a local doctor who would prescribe for us? And then that was something which we tried to set up, and I don't think it's been fully resolved yet. But also just dealing with people. I mean, I expected actually to hear a lot more of the psychological trauma that people had gone through, and I didn't really, until I started speaking to people on Shabbos and sort of speaking to them as people rather than as patients, I didn't really hear very much of their stories. I did have one chap who was quite challenging to deal with, who described what he'd left behind. He'd left, property and a business, and was finding it very difficult to cope with, and asked me to prescribe him buprenorphine, which he liked to take occasionally back home to try and calm him, and got quite annoyed with me when I explained that we hadn't brought any with. It wasn't possible for me to prescribe that type of thing, and I wouldn't recommend it anyway. And at various stages over the week that I was there, he sort of accosted me and told me what a bad doctor I was, and call yourself a doctor, you're meant to be helping people. And then he managed to go, he said, look, I've spoken to my doctor in Ukraine, and he told me that I should try some metoprolol. So I went to the chemist and I bought some. So I said, well, actually, I was thinking about that. Maybe we should try a beta blocker or something. But yeah, I hadn't quite managed to communicate that to him before he jumped the gun. Anyway, he was a bit of a challenging customer, but all in all, people were, I think, quite grateful to have a doctor to see.
Right. I mean, you mentioned a virus they have. What about the COVID-19 situation? What's the COVID-19 situation in that area in general, and with regard to these people?
So in line with the current government guidance, which is about to start next week, the testing sort of slipped my mind before I went there. I didn't take any tests with me, but I felt really, there could have been a lot of COVID there. There probably was, and there probably is still. I felt that people were traumatized enough. They had such a difficult time. They'd come out of Ukraine with very, very little. Their future is and still is completely uncertain. No idea where they're going, and I felt that it would actually probably be quite cruel to diagnose people with COVID and tell them that they had to sort of isolate in their hotel rooms for a week. I thought they had more important problems to deal with, and that's a decision I made. And no one expressed any concern there actually about COVID at all. So I hope I made the right decision. I imagine that locking people up and isolating them in their rooms if they were confirmed to have COVID would probably have had very little impact on the actual transmission, considering that there was probably huge, if there was COVID there, huge numbers of people with it asymptomatically or pre-symptomatically. So I felt that's the judgment I made, and I spoke to a couple of people about it who agreed.
Right. So you're now there, and you've already told us some of the human stories, and you've also put some stories onto Twitter as well. From the time you were there, are there any of those you want to tell us about?
I think that, well, maybe Jeremy, at this point, you can tell us a bit about the sort of the trauma that the people had to go through on the evacuation.
Jeremy?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, just backtracking for a second, it was definitely invaluable to us having David there. Everyone really, really appreciated it, and he really was busy the whole time he was there. I think also just bear in mind that many of these, even the young families, the young mothers that we have, in particular, they themselves grew up without mothers. Their mothers aren't in the picture. There's no grandparents around. You know, I think when we have younger kids, if something's wrong with the kid, they have a runny nose or whatever it is, we'll first consult with our parents and ask them what to do before we run off to a doctor. Whereas these people don't have that luxury. You know, we're their parents, we're everything. And I'm talking about the whole team. You know, I'm one small cog in a very large machine here. And the whole management team pulls together and works on this, but it's really, you know, they turn to us for everything. They turn to us for the small decisions, they turn to us for the big decisions. Where are we going to go next, what we're doing, and all that kind of thing. They kind of leave in our hands. And having David there was absolutely, like I said, invaluable. And thank God we've managed since then to bring in someone else. There was a couple of days break when we didn't have someone and we really felt it. And we understand and acknowledge that it's absolutely necessary to have a doctor on site, and it's crucial. So going back to the actual evacuation, again, I think everything happens really so fast. And in the lead up, the team, were extremely prepared, and we knew what all our options were. And we had options, you know, all across the spectrum for sheltering in place in Odessa and which of our facilities we would use. If we needed to evacuate in country, where we would go, and we'd scouted out sites. And if we would have to leave the country, which borders would we try and cross. But I think we may have failed slightly in conveying our preparedness to the community. I think, like I said, they trust us and they assume that we'll take that responsibility and we'll take care of them, which thank God we were able to do. But I think everything came together so quickly. It was from one second to the next. It was almost, we had WhatsApp groups ready with a whole chain of command, who would be WhatsApping who and what groups and telling them where to meet and when, and rendezvous points and everything. But I think for them, it happened from one second to the next. They suddenly got a WhatsApp at 6 in the morning. Okay, at 8 o'clock, the buses are leaving from the synagogue. We told them before, obviously, to have a bag packed and what was the limit they could bring and what was important for them to bring with them. But I think everything happened so fast that it took time for people to really realize what was going on. I think we had more of a preparedness, and when we left the synagogue and we left everything behind, it was pretty emotional for us, but I don't think they had that luxury. And I think the real trauma only settled in later. The journey itself was pretty hazardous. We saw and heard shelling. We had air raid sirens pretty regularly. There was times where we were on pit stops and suddenly an air raid siren would go off and people had to scramble back on the buses. We had food stocks and food supplies that we'd stockpiled leading up to the war, but it wasn't prepared food. And in the end, you know, when you're on a bus for 28 hours having dry rice and raw eggs, you know, that doesn't really help anyone. So people were making do with what nash they'd taken with. We went through a lot of checkpoints, armed police and soldiers coming on board the buses and checking everyone out. So I think the way was pretty traumatic, but I think really David experienced only finally when we'd got here and suddenly people said, okay, this is going to be a midterm stop. And suddenly people had time to start thinking about their situation and realizing what situation they were in, and the stresses that he mentioned of having left everything behind. Their whole life has been left behind in Odessa: homes, cars, businesses, appliances, jobs, absolutely everything they've left behind. And the future is totally uncertain. They have no idea if they'll get back to Odessa ever. They have no idea where they will end up. They don't know when this is going to end or how it's going to end. Will Odessa fall under Russian control? In which case, probably no one will go back. Will Odessa still be, you know, will it be standing, or will it look like Mariupol if we ever get to go back? In which case, also we can't probably go back. So I think that's really weighing on people's minds. Ahead of this call, I spoke to the physician who we do have here now at the moment, the GP. And I asked her this morning, you know, what kinds of things are you saying? So again, what kinds of things are you seeing? Sorry. And again, she confirmed what David had said. It's mainly minor ailments and viruses and bugs and that kind of thing. I mean, she said she had to deal with a couple of serious things, an abscess that was in a bad way and a few other things. But she said mainly what she's seeing is a lot of stress and the psychosomatic things that come with that, where people are just, you know, they're coming with all kinds of symptoms, but it's really brought on by stress. And she said she's had quite long conversations with people at this stage, you know, when they're more open to speak about what's going on and what their feelings are. And really people are suffering from that trauma, you know, the trauma now of not knowing. And sometimes it's the silly things, you know, it's a woman who burst out crying to her that she really wants her perfumes. She misses her perfumes. You know, it could be anything, which we would take as a triviality, but you don't know what the trigger is for people. And really we're seeing a lot of that at the moment. And we have brought over our psychologists from Odessa. We have psychologists who work with the children because the children have a lot of issues, from abandonment issues to all kinds of things. And we spoke to our psychologists when we realized what was going on, and we asked them to please come out, and we offered that we'll bring out their families with them if that makes a difference. And we do have a handful of them on hand at the moment. And they're working with the children, but equally with the adults, and it's absolutely necessary.
That's a very clear indication that there are huge problems still ahead, which are going to have to be faced, and the uncertainty about whether this is a permanent situation or whether this is a temporary situation and they'll go back home, or if home exists, is going to be a massive problem. This is Odessa? You're in the Odessa area. Does each city? Yeah, sorry.
No, we came from the Odessa region,
Yeah.
the city of Odessa.
Yeah, but you're coming from Odessa. Are there, other cities? Do other cities have similar links with outside organizations and have gone into Romania, or are you the only one going into Romania at the moment?
I think we've been very, very fortunate. I think we're pretty much the only ones who've come out intact as a community. We have everyone here who we would consider our core. The last 3 people actually made it here today. We had 3 who were stuck in Western Ukraine with absolutely zero paperwork, and they actually made it here today. So no, I think we're unique in that regard, that we're the only ones who, I think we were the best prepared probably. And we followed our plan, and we have everyone here. And we're very happy about that and relieved about that, obviously, but it also has its own challenges. Remember also, like I said before, about 80% of these people don't have any paperwork at all. So, I'm not even sure they exist. A border guard may have stamped a copy of a birth certificate to allow us into the country. And I think the government's aware of that, but I don't think anyone really knows how to tackle that problem at this current moment. We have 2 women here who legally don't exist in the country. Again, no one's talking about kicking us out. The Romanians have been very good to us, but they need to give birth in the next month. Yeah, and we have no idea practically how to achieve that. If they go to the hospital, they don't even have a passport. They don't have anything. They don't have their medical history. So we're working on various angles to try and sort that all out. But it's very complex issues, especially when you're talking about medical history. And the social services have come to the hotel. They heard that there's a large group of children here. They came 2 groups of social workers from the city, from the local city that we're in, and from the region. And they sat down with us for many hours, and they wanted to know the exact situation of the children. What's our legal story with them? Are we their guardians? Are we not their guardians? Do we have the parents' permission to have them here with us? They wanted to know their vaccination history. And as prepared as we were, we didn't bring with all the kids' medical records and vaccination histories. And they were, they're saying, well, we need to vaccinate these kids. We need to know what vaccinations they've had, what ones they need, and we need to keep current with that. So there's a lot of challenges, particularly on the medical front.
The question of vaccination, are vaccines available there, or does one have to bring vaccines from abroad? What was the experience?
So our kids are up to date on the vaccines that they were supposed to have in Ukraine. And I assume, or I know, that the vaccinations are available here in Romania, and the authorities want to give them to them. The problem is we don't know exactly which ones the kids have had. They may have them at different ages in Ukraine than they have them here in Romania. They may not be totally current, so we don't really know. And we're kind of skirting around the issue. We keep telling the authorities, yes, we're going to try and get them, but it's one thing saying, and it's a totally different thing getting these documents out of Odessa.
Are the children? David, you mentioned fetal alcohol syndrome as being a cause of some of the problems that some of these children had. How whether that a significant number? How many of them had that kind of handicapped situation, if you like?
I'm not. I mean, I don't know. I don't. I didn't know any medical history on any of them, but I wouldn't say that there are any sort of. I didn't see any children who were severely disabled in any way. They were mostly just sort of normal and active-looking children. Right. I will say one thing that I came to realize over time, which Jeremy sort of mentioned. After I'd spent the first night and then the whole first day seeing people, and by Friday morning, things had calmed down a lot. The patient slowed down to a trickle, and I thought, look, I'm here till Tuesday, Wednesday. What am I going to be doing for the next few days? And I've got these 2 ladies who came with me, maybe maybe I can go somewhere else where I'd be able to contribute more, and they can stay, and I can do remote calls, and I can, they can examine children for me, and then I can manage them remotely. And so I made quite a lot of inquiries on Friday and on after Shabbos about going elsewhere in Europe. I've got sort of a friend who is on the Conference of European Rabbis, and they all talk to each other in a big WhatsApp group, and he posted something. There's a doctor in Romania who's interested in going to help, and then the people from Kishinev in Moldova said that they would, I would be helpful there. And then there's someone else. They put me in touch with a field hospital at the border, Medica, it's a place which is the border between Ukraine and Poland. So I spoke to these people, but it turned out that I think they had plenty of medical help already. These were sort of border crossings and large towns where if people wanted to go and help, they just went there and turned up and helped. And I think quite a lot of Israelis and people went along just turned up, whether it was unofficial, whether it's official through Hatzalah or whatever. So I sort of quickly realized that I wasn't actually needed anywhere else. And the group that I was with, actually, there was no one sort of landing there to help out because they're in the middle of nowhere. And so I thought I would better serve them better serve in general by staying there. And actually, I realized afterwards that it was most of what I was doing was just reassuring, just being there and reassuring the parents and reassuring the carers that, I examined them and you don't worry, your child's all right, they're going to get better. And that was a really valuable lesson for me, actually. You don't always have to do as a doctor. A lot of probably my main job there was just to reassure people. I saw someone posted on the chat just now that just turning up to help sounds like a really bad idea. You say that, but I know people who've got, I wouldn't say necessarily as doctors. I've got a friend who heard that I was going, and he sort of said, well, why don't I go and do something? And he took his daughters, he went for Purim, he went to Budapest, he took a suitcase full of things, clothes and things, just turned up at the shul in Budapest and found refugees and people who'd come with almost nothing and just gave things out. There are people who are turning up and just helping. I think most of Eastern Europe is in quite a lot of chaos at the moment, and there's a lot of people who need help. And I think if people want to go and help, there are ways for them to do that.
If anybody from a doctor's group came along and asked Jeremy tomorrow, is there any scope for me to come now? How would you handle that? What would you say?
I think people have been tremendously generous, particularly from England, which is probably further away, but one of the better off countries in Europe, certainly better off than most of the countries around us. And people have really sent us a lot of stuff. People have come and helped. And it's really been heartwarming. I think the problem on our end is, and it's particularly now, we need to work things out better. In other words, we need to get out there exactly what it is we need. But, because we've been a bit overwhelmed. This is what we need now. This is what we need a month from now. This is what we need 2 weeks from now, whatever it is. In other words, now I think for another GP, let's say, to turn up now wouldn't be a great idea because we have someone here. And I think, she's got her hands full, but I think she's coping with what's on her plate. But when she leaves a week or 10 days from now, then yes, we'll need to schedule someone else to come. And I know David's helping us in that regard, looking for someone else who'll be suitable and who could do it. Because we definitely do need someone on site. But like I say, we need to schedule things. We need to be more ordered in what it is exactly that we need and when we need it. That's basically it.
Yeah. So that was part of what I was doing whilst I was there as well. When I wasn't seeing patients, a large amount of time was spent dealing with the huge numbers of emails that the organization got, offers of help, not just from the Jewish community, from all over the place, from doctors and nurses all over the country, actually, who'd seen the calls on social media and have got in touch offering to help. And then it was quite a big job to sort of go through these volunteers and try and work out who would be suitable, who wouldn't be. And I tried to prioritize people who could speak either Hebrew or Russian or both, just for the communication's sake. And so we have got and I had to, when I sort of got the candidates down, I had to then sort of make further inquiries about them, get references, and make sure that I didn't have sort of clowns turning up. Although you will see later on, there's a picture of actually some medical clowns who actually did turn up. not when I was there, but that was quite a lot of work. And we've got people, so we've got a woman there now. You'll see pictures of her soon. When she leaves next week, we've got a GP from Israel, another one's coming. And then after that, over Pesach, we've got a nurse from England who's going. She speaks Russian. And so we're all right till after Pesach, and I've got several more sort of in the pipeline. And then, we'll see. Who knows if what's going to happen. You've got a plan, but also you can't put things, make things too concrete, because at some stage the community may well have to move, and so we have to adapt. Also, right. I must say also there was I got a huge number of offers of people, not just medical and nursing help, but a lot of people just contacted me or contacted the organization just wanting to host refugees, bring them over to England. We want to host them. We've got a spare bedroom. I got a couple of inquiries about wanting to adopt these children, formal adoption, which I understand through the authorities there is not a simple procedure at all, can't really be done. But yeah, a huge amount of goodness has come out, people wanting to help.
That's very positive. And the question of adoption is actually one that has been happening from Romania and from Ukraine for some time. And presumably, though that has effectively stopped the previous methods of adoption during this period, and one would have to start again anew. Is that correct?
Jeremy, tell us about that.
It's a very complicated issue. All of the kids' legal status, it differs from kid to kid. But the larger picture, if we were interested in adoption, putting them up for adoption, it's not in our hands. In other words, it reverts to the state more or less, and then the state, so to speak, gets first dibs, which means for, I think, the first 18 months, the state gets to try and get these kids adopted, and they can put them up for adoption to anyone they want, which is obviously, from our point of view, not ideal. And then only after that, after these 18 months, if no one takes them, no one local in Ukraine takes them, we can put them up for adoption inside or outside of Ukraine. But it's really, we found it not to be, obviously, for obvious reasons, it's not an ideal situation. It doesn't really work for our kids. And I think David can attest to the fact, he's been out, he's seen, it's an extremely, extremely tight-knit community. Our young couples and young families, they grew up like these kids in our homes. They know exactly what the kids are going through. It's really a community of siblings, whether it's the kids who are in the homes now or the married couples who also grew up in the homes, and like I say, are like siblings to these younger kids, and everyone gets on together, and everyone has a great relationship with each other. And again, we know it's ideal for kids to grow up in a family setting and in a home. But I think one stage below that would be what we're doing. And I think they grow up into healthy, well-adjusted adults, and we've seen that in the community, and they're productive members of society, and they're productive members of the community. And thank God we've had a good success rate. The organization has had a good success rate over the last 25 years and has been doing a good job.
There too, you raised the question of medicines. What about equipment? Is the equipment supplies needed as well in the area where you're operating?
Medical equipment?
Or medical equipment.
I don't think so, really. We've got a cupboard there full of, I think, maybe 10 or 15 nebulizers, which that may be the case that one might be used at some stage. We didn't really know what we were going into, that's the truth. So, we heard that there was a lot of respiratory viruses and a lot of diarrhea. And so we were prepared for a worse situation than we actually had to deal with. But I don't think there's any specific need for any more medical kit there.
Well, the question of diarrhea raises the question of there were infusions and infusion packs and infusing fluids available.
I tried to get some Diarrhelite. I'm told that Diarrhelite doesn't exist. Well, not doesn't exist, but is to bring it from England. Apparently, it's not available in England at the moment. This is what the pharmacists told me. I know you can make oral rehydration solution just in a homemade way, but we didn't actually need that. It wasn't necessary to do that. I'll show you a picture soon of the current doctor there who sent me a picture today of this evening of her. she's giving someone an IV drip. So we did take a few things, but I'm very pleased to say that I didn't have to use them.
And presumably hepatitis C is as common as it was in all countries of the former Soviet Union.
I imagine so. I hadn't actually crossed my mind, but I didn't actually have to deal with any blood at any stage,
Right.
or really bodily fluids, so it didn't really affect me.
Right. Were there any deaths in the period of time you were there at all?
So any deaths?
Yes.
I didn't. No, not when I was there, thankfully.
Right. Okay. And you know, kind of the idea that these people don't know how long they're going to be there and how long they're going to remain in these non-home circumstances is the major cause of anxiety, really.
I think so. It must be. I can't imagine what these people are going through. I really can't. You know, to have to leave with a suitcase or less. You know, what do you pack? What do you pack in your suitcase? You know, pajamas or you know, sort of valuables. It's agonizing decisions to have to make, and who knows if they're ever going to see anything again and what their future is. And people did sort of let that out to me. I mean, let me show you some pictures now.
Please.
If I share my screen.
Just by the way, one family had someone drive their car over from Odessa today, and I actually saw them crying over it when it arrived. You know, that kind of thing. It's...
Yeah. Imagine.
Let's here. You see, so that's me sitting in the, well, it's a hotel room, really. You can see that we've moved the beds around, and one of them is just full of medication. What you can't see is there's a cupboard full of things, and the shower in there is also full of the shower and bathroom also full of boxes and bottles and things. You can see the BNFs on the side, which I brought with from England. I had to use it once, I think. So that was our room, and that's me seeing one of the little orphan children. With this in the middle, that's Ludmilla, who's the nurse who looks after those children, and actually was very busy. I think a lot of people went to her instead of to me. And suddenly the doctor who's there now told me that she had a long chat with her. She said she's excellent, but she's overwhelmed with what people are asking her to do. This is, another little boy that I saw who liked playing with my stethoscope. That was I didn't really have a chair. I sat on the corner of a bed. There wasn't much room. This is my Vika. Was my interpreter and secretary. That's how what she used to put a call out on the WhatsApp group, say who needs to see the doctor, and she was like the receptionist. She told people when to come, and she interpreted for me. This is the Friday night. Obviously, I found this very emotional. It was really sad to see. This is not a holiday in a hotel where everyone's lighting together. These are people who had their own homes only 2 weeks before, and never dreamt that they would have to light Shabbos candles all together in a hotel as refugees. So I managed to sort of grab this picture before I went off to shul. But that moment really made me sad. Now, Shabbos, obviously I didn't take any pictures, but there was spirited singing, pardon me, that happened. That was, after Shabbos, people sat around and singing for hours. So this is part of what we saw. This is the dining room there. And people just long lines of people queuing up for food. It's a huge logistical operation. I think the food, but Jeremy, where does the food come from?
So we again, people donated food, but we're buying food. We've actually had 1 month donated by World Central Kitchen, which ends in a couple of weeks. But we're ordering already for Pesach. We're ordering food from all over Europe, really. We have our own kitchen. We obviously cashed the kitchen when we got there. We've brought extra equipment so we can do baking as well. And we're, now we're sourcing more or less raw ingredients. We're getting the chickens from one place, the meat from somewhere else. But it's quite an operation. It's obviously there's a lot of logistics involved, and we've got trucks arriving almost every day. You're talking about, at the moment, we're preparing close to 3,000 meals a day. Between everyone. So that's a pretty, even on a Europe-wide scale, if you take England and maybe France out of the picture, if you factor in the whole rest of Eastern Europe, the number of kosher meals that are being provided across that region has suddenly jumped and has gone through the roof. And there are problems sourcing, especially now with Pesach coming up, we're facing real issues.
Thank you. When you mentioned Pesach, I did see actually an alert coming out saying that sunflower oil is going to be in short supply this year for Pesach because Ukraine and Russia are the world's major suppliers of sunflower oil. So get to the shops early, everyone. So that's the dining room. This are the children. So the dining room was in a separate hotel, so they needed to sort of walk there and back for every meal. These are children of the orphanage, and these are. I didn't take one at night when they were sleeping, but they're sort of all over each other in hotel rooms. And I went up one night when they were all lying in bed, and sort of 6 or 7 of little children to one of these beds. And you can understand that viruses are going to spread like wildfire.
You'll also notice that they're all wearing the same, which was donated. Yes. It was sent from England and donated very kindly. So they all got these new furry tops that they were all very happy with.
Okay, what's next? I haven't shared all my pictures. This is Yulia. She was, you can see, not really smiling for the photo. And she, I saw her crying in the lobby one evening, speaking. I think her husband is stuck somewhere in Ukraine. Can't get out, and other family members. This is Zina, and Babushka, she was called, and she liked it. I posted a video on Twitter of her. She was proudly sort of recalling what she'd learned in school. Hamlet, to be or not to be, that is the question. So she remembered those English words. She talked to me a bit in English. She hadn't spoken English really for many years. And that's her granddaughter, Abigail, who gave me a lovely hug when I'd finished looking down her throat. These are some of the other girls from the orphanage. This is Yoav. Yoav was someone who I chatted to at one of the meals over Shabbos, who I really felt quite humbled that he was talking to me about how he said, his wife and his young family, he said, we don't have very much and we didn't leave very much behind. He said, the people I feel really sorry for are the people who are well off in Odessa and have had to leave huge amounts behind. And, those are the people who are really suffering. That's what he told me. And then he said, one day we all leave this world and we can't take anything with us at all. The more you have, the more possessions you accumulate in this world, the harder it's going to be to leave. And I learned a lot from this guy. And then there was another lady called Sharon. She really made me sad. She was really upbeat. Her husband's away. I think he's a shofet. He's working in South America at the moment. She's got 7 children. She packed them all up. And she said, no, she says, my children are on holiday here. She's looking at things in a very sort of positive, upbeat way. But she told me how they all had to pack bags, and she told them to pack their school bags. Each one packed a rucksack. And she said to put 3 things in. She said, put a pair of pajamas, put a set of weekday clothes, and put a set of Shabbos clothes in there, because that's what you're going to need to wear when you meet Mashiach. Because when else is he going to come, if not now? So this is really the story of me and when I was there. I spent a week with these people and became quite friendly with some of them, and really think about them a lot. Actually think they're in my heart still. And if people keep on asking me, am I going to go back? I've got my wife sitting to my left. You can't see her. I don't know if I'm getting nods of encouragement or not. But at one stage, maybe I will go back. But yeah, we've had so many offers of help, and even through, I see Leora's written about doing virtual consultation and telemedicine. That's definitely an option which we can look into. I did offer that. There was a week when we didn't have a doctor after I left, and before the next one arrived, and I offered to do calls over Zoom and WhatsApp and whatever, and I offered several times, but I think that people are suspicious. I'm used to doing it through COVID the last 2 years, but I think that there wasn't really much demand for it. A few people went to the city to see a doctor. So what's happening there now? We've got another doctor there. She is called Dr. Gilat Reich. She's a pediatrician, I think, from Israel, and she's taken it up a level. I mean, these are 2 medical clowns that came through the joint. I think they've left now. But she's a pediatrician who's also interested in psychology and especially with regard to major disasters. I think she went to Southeast Asia in the wake of tsunamis and earthquakes and things like that. So she's told me she came with a Russian-speaking nurse and a social worker as well. So she's tried to set up some sort of program for psychological therapy, and she's managing to talk to the people now. And I think I regret in a little way that I felt quite intrusive, actually. I mean, to ask people their stories, how did you escape and what have you left behind and what trauma are you going through? I think it was very raw when I was there. And, you know, people had only been there a week or so and people kept on arriving as I was there. And so I think that was the right move on my part. I think it was too raw. But she's, you know, it's a few weeks down the line now, and she's actually talking to people at a much greater length and depth than I managed to, and helping them in a psychological way. I'll show you a couple more pictures. So that's a picture she sent me this evening of her giving some IV fluids to someone who, you know, with severe vomiting. And yeah, this is a lovely story. I saw this picture that she sent me. I said, where was this baby? This baby is a 3-week-old baby. That baby wasn't there when I was there. And she said, yes. Oh, well, I found out that this baby, well, maybe Jeremy, do you know the story?
No, this is a family who had to stay behind because the woman needed to give birth. And they stayed behind, and she had the baby on Friday 3 weeks ago, and the bris was in Odessa. I think a video of it went viral. I think there was less than 1 million there for the bris. And as soon as they were ready to move, which was a week after that, we brought them out by ambulance from Odessa to here in Romania. I think even part of that journey was on Shabbos because it was just desperate to get them out of there. And now they're here. And she told me this afternoon that she'd seen the baby and it was very good, and there was issues with the mother and whatnot. And no, she's doing a great job, like you say.
You mentioned Shabbos there. It's interesting because, you know, the organization is a religious organization, and it really spoke volumes to me how I sat at a Shabbos meal with Raphael, who's the CEO, and he had his phone out at the Shabbos meal. He was busy on his phone the whole Shabbos because there were people from Ukraine contacting him saying, you know, how can we get out? We need help. And, you know, this is really life and death stuff. And so that really hit home to me that when I wasn't just dealing with trying to help this group, but there's a huge number of people in great distress, still many trapped in Romania and need evacuating.
I mean, it's a troubling question. Is anything being done about educating, about any form of education going on amongst the people there? And is there going to be any attempt to do that?
You're talking here in Romania?
Yes.
Yeah. So absolutely. So we actually found a few days after we were here, and it took time till we could negotiate it. Again, remember, it was until the last couple of days, it was absolutely freezing cold here. But we found next to the 2 hotels what was a conference center, a very nice conference center. Obviously, it hadn't been heated, so it was freezing cold. It took them a few days to heat it up for us. But we've now moved over the base measures. The shul is now there in that building. And we've taken the whole downstairs for our school. So classes are now up and running. They start a bit later than they would in Odessa, but by 10 o'clock, all the kids who are here are now in classes over there. There's a bunch of rooms downstairs which they're using, and the shul which we're using upstairs is sectioned into different kinds of rooms. So they're learning there as well. And we're actually having Zoom classes with the kids who are not part of the orphanage, but they're in our school system. The ones who are back in Odessa, we're having Zoom classes with them. I think COVID helped us in that way, that kind of became the norm over the course of a year. So everyone's used to it. Everyone has the equipment they need and knows how to use it. And we have some of our teachers here with us, and some of our teachers are stuck back in Odessa. So we're using both. We're using the teachers that are here giving classes, and they're on this end of the Zoom call, and the teachers over there are giving classes to the kids who are there, plus the ones who are here. So no, the education system is actually up and running, and we're very happy about that.
Right. And, you know, the time, I'm conscious of the time, it's now 11 o'clock for you, Jeremy. It's with all this kind of organization and all the effort that goes in, sleep must be an important commodity. But I think Leora actually has as in addition to a question, has put onto the chat site a comment, which I think summarizes really feelings about what we've heard from both of you, that this is really incredible work, and it's inspiring to listen to it and to listen to what can be done when people make the effort and volunteer and roll up their sleeves and go and do something. David, have you got any comments to make on those kind of lines, what people can do and what you would recommend?
I think that, all right, let me just say at this stage, I'm getting all sorts of people telling me what a hero I am, and I feel quite uncomfortable with that, actually. I mean, I didn't go to a war zone. I didn't go to a refugee camp where there were sort of people crawling over the border with no legs, and you know, it was my normal job, and maybe even easier than my normal job. I just saw loads and loads of coughs and colds and tummy aches and temperatures. But the fact that I went there, I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity, because it's made a deep impact on me. And I think that you know, I'm still involved. Like, you know, I'm in touch with the doctors, you know, to try and set up, you know, who's going next, and you know, the doctor there currently is contacting me every now and again. You know, do we have this? Do we have that? And you know, with questions, and so I'm still hope to be involved. And I think that people who want to, by all means, contact, you know, us. Like we say, this is open-ended. We've got no idea how long it's going to last. It may be the case that we can set up some sort of telemedicine service. I think that, and as I said before, until Pesach, we're covered till after Pesach, and with one or two more people in the pipeline, and then we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens from there. I think from my perspective, I mean, Tikva haven't asked me. I'm not, you know, representing the organisation at all, and I don't, you know, they haven't asked me to make an appeal. But I think that if people do want to help, you know, the sums that are involved are eye-watering, really. And maybe Jeremy can tell us a little bit about what's needed.
Yeah, no, like you say, the costs are pretty crazy. And again, remember that we're still funding things in Odessa, hasn't it? We've totally moved over here. We have staff in Odessa. We have over 300. I mean, we started with over 300 staff in Odessa. People, obviously, we're not going to let them go in the middle of a war. So we're still paying them. We're paying for security on all our facilities. We have 14 major buildings in Odessa and a number of smaller ones. We're paying for security on those. We're paying utilities. We're paying our land taxes. You know, whatever it is, but a lot of the expenses still involved in Odessa. We're still having to pay. But also just being here is an absolute fortune of money, obviously. So, you know, our clothes, those needs were taken care of very, very generously by, like I said, a lot for people from England, but all over the continent, really. But again, just feeding and putting these people up is costing a fortune of money. We've tried to, again, you think these people who've left behind their job and their livelihood and everything. So we're trying to employ as many community members as possible over here, whether it's people doing cleaning or helping out in the kitchen or setting up the dining room, or people who weren't previously teachers who are now teaching or learning one-on-one with people, babysitters, all that kind of thing. But again, we're putting the money into that. We're paying these people. We've given them a stipend over the course of the month that we've been here, that we've been out of Ukraine. So that also, you know, they can go out. We don't have, if someone wants to buy toiletries, they don't have to come to us and ask for toilets. People have left with nothing, and many of them don't have access to funds or cash or anything. You know, our Ukrainian cards aren't really working, or they're working sporadically. So again, we're trying to support them in any way possible and giving them kind of pocket money. But you know, Romania's far more expensive than Ukraine was. So yeah, it's just to keep this operation going is costing a lot of money. It's a huge drain.
Okay, so that's if anyone is interested in helping at all in that way, there is a and that's my Twitter address, which you can look at the sort of things that I posted in a bit more detail. But yeah, there's a link. There's a Charity Extra website. It's quite easy to find the Tikva appeal on there. You can contribute through my page or just to the general appeal. But I think I spoke to one of the people in charge last night, and she said that, you know, I said, do these little donations really make a difference? You know, £50, £100, £180. So she said they all add up hugely, and everything makes a difference. So Thank you for inviting me, Professor Katz.
It's a pleasure, and as I said, it's an honor to have had you here, and to express our appreciation for what you're doing and for the way you've been able to tell us about it. So good luck, and we hope that it will be possible to continue, both in the human sense as well as in the financial sense, because both, of course, are very important.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thanks, Jeremy, for joining us. And you know, your time there is valuable. So we appreciate that you've taken the time to join us.
Thanks to everyone for joining, and thank you, David and Professor Katz.